Hi.
Hi.
Oh.
Simon.
What?
I'm back. Hi, Corey.
Hey,
Hi,
you.
Susan.
And we also have Mark. So we have
Hi.
Good night.
Australian. Our Australian numbers are going out of the roof. I'm glad to have you guys here. And there's Beatrice.
Yeah.
Dad. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. Let's see, we're just about time to start, so I'm just going to check our numbers here. We still have quite a few people to come on.
Well, as a pop quiz, who can guess my background image? Which town on the Camino Frances is my background image from? I'll shift aside.
I don't know, it's gorgeous.
So
Maybe you have an idea?
Maybe Rabanal del Camino?
No, no. It's on the Meseta.
Antanas.
Yes, that's it.
Right.
Kurt.
we have a winner.
No prize, I'm afraid, just bragging rights.
Bragging rights are good. Hey, Jill.
Yeah.
We had a wonderful visit with the priest and the church there on Antanas.
Yeah,
We walked through there. Oh man, it was just a wonderful
gorgeous.
time.
Pretty.
So cool.
It was one of my favorite places because you come through on that plane and you don't see it until the last minute as you go over the edge. You're hot and you're tired, and then there's this oasis just beneath you.
Yeah.
I know the next time I walk, I'm not going to stay in big cities. I'm just going to stay in these little villages.
Yeah.
Oh.
That sounds so good. The next time I walk.
Oh,
Especially for Australians.
yeah. I've got my first vaccination.
Oh,
They're not letting us out.
Yeah,
It pays to be elderly.
it does. Yes, like finally, there's some advantage to being old.
look way too young. How did you get in there? Anyone else have theirs yet?
Yeah, I have mine.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome.
Week also.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. So glad to hear that. All right, well, this will probably be a little jumbled to start with because I will have to admit some other people as they jump on, but it's 5 o'clock and I want to be respectful of everyone that made the extra effort to get here right away. And thank you so much for doing that. So we are so lucky tonight to have 2 special guests with us. Our first guest is Beebe Bahrami, and talking to her first. So, then following her, we'll have Father Stephen Rindahl, and he'll be here to talk about Warriors on the Way. So I will get to more of that in a few moments, but I just wanted to offer up, if you want to unmute yourself right now to say hello and welcome our special guest, please do that. And then in a few moments, I will have you, if you want, to put your name into the participant or the chats and just mention where you're calling in from tonight, just to give BB and Father Stephen an idea of where we're all from. And then also, if you wanted to add your email, then we can put your email on our mailing list so we can let you know about our upcoming events. So anyway, so let's unmute and everybody say hello and welcome to our special guests and to our first timers here at the Camino Cafe. Buen Camino, everybody.
One Camino.
So great to see everybody. Thank you.
And let's see, we just had Robert and Michelle join us, and Jolene and Robert. So thank you, and Margie. My goodness. Okay, so this is wonderful. So we do have several upcoming events that I wanted to mention. We have next Tuesday on February 16th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, we have Spanish conversation practice, and that is led by Maria Seco, and Maria lives actually in Spain, and she's a fantastic teacher. So that is a free practice that she puts on for us once a month. It is really wonderful. It ends up being a little bit of a cultural lesson as well. So I hope you'll join us for that. And then right after that, on February 4th, we have book club, and that book is David White's amazing book titled Work as Pilgrimage, and it is a fascinating book. I can barely finish it, highlighting so much. I love it so much. So thank you, Kurt, for the recommendation on that book. The following month on March 24th, we will be reading Beth Jazino's book, which is Walking to the End of the World, 1,000 Miles on the Camino de Santiago. And she will actually be at that book club meeting to talk about her book. So that's going to be a really wonderful opportunity. So I hope you can join us there. And our next happy hour will be on March 8th. And that will be, we will have special guest Wendy Jones, and she will be bringing a couple of other folks with her, and she will be discussing all the pilgrimages in Japan. So that's going to be a really fun call. So lots of fun stuff coming up. I will try to put some of that in the chat here in a little bit, as well as a link for Beebe's book site on Amazon, and then Father Stephen's link for Warriors on the Way. So I'll do that in a little bit. But let's just take a moment. I know if you guys are like me, you've had to rush here and kind of get ready. So I just wanted to ground a little bit before we actually start speaking with Beebe. And so you can have your eyes open or the eyes can be closed. But just take a moment to find your breath. Notice where you're feeling it right now. It might be in the upper part of your chest. It might be in the lower region around the belly. And just notice that perhaps as you begin to bring attention to the breath, that the breath just begins to calm down a little bit. And you might find yourself breathing just a bit deeper.
Yeah, are you muted? You want to unmute so they can't hear you?
Oh, yeah, mute.
And we'll just take a moment to center on what brought us together tonight, and that is the Camino. And to remember that we're all here to connect, to be connected, and to offer connection to one another, to be seen and to see everyone else, to be heard, and to have a chance to hear others. It's that chance to reconnect with the Camino family and to share our stories and to learn more about the Camino and to welcome new people into each of our Camino families. So thank you for being here at the Camino Cafe. We'll get started. So we're first going to speak with Beebe and talk about her book. And she actually has written several books, but the book that we'll be focusing a little bit more on tonight, and I'm sure we'll talk about things from other books, but is The Moon Guide to the Camino de Santiago and Sacred Sites, Historic Village, Local Food and Wine. So all the stuff we all love. So if you haven't muted yourself, please mute so that way we don't have any background noise. So welcome, Beebe. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me here. It's great to be at the Camino Cafe Albergue. Wonderful to be with all of you.
We were so nervous to even extend the invitation, and just delighted how readily you just jumped right on and said, yeah, I'll be there. So thank you so much.
No, I'm totally honored. Thank you for asking. Yeah.
Corey and I are huge fans of this book. We have read it and we were planning on using it as our guide for our next Camino. Of course, that got cut short this year by everything, but we are thrilled to now have it.
Search this evening in the Himalayan region of India after part of it.
So, so just wanted to start off with, Beebe, I've listened to some interviews that you've done with some others on podcasts, as well as looked at your website. And I'm just fascinated by your background of first becoming an anthropologist and then how that led to being on the Camino and then becoming a writer about the Camino. So I just wondered if you could start with and maybe share with everyone a little bit about your background and how all of those things happened and what led you here tonight.
Sure. It all goes back to the Camino. It's so great to be able to preach to the choir about this. I know you'll all understand, but for me, it really, I was a college student working on my bachelor's degree, my undergraduate degree, and I was in molecular biology. That was my training, and that's the degree I got. But my last semester, I realized that I think I picked the wrong career. I spent all that time in the lab, and I realized, I didn't see myself spending all my life in a lab or even going to medical school. And so my last semester applied for a scholarship to study abroad, because I'd always been interested in languages and culture and history. And I studied a liberal arts degree as well while I was doing my science degree. And I got the scholarship and I got to go and study for 6 months in Sevilla, in the south, in Andalusia, in Spain. And one day, I think it was in mid-March, one of the professors at the university was pacing back and forth at the University of Seville, which is the old tobacco factory. The tobacco, where Carmen is, was set, anyway, that's it, we won't segue too much into opera, but it was the old tobacco factory. And so it was just perfect. It was the old days. This was 1986, and the professor was pacing back and forth smoking and tapping ash onto, any desk that was within range. And I was always sitting up front to try to see his lips so that I could understand the Spanish better and master it. And that day, it was the history of Spain. And that day he was talking about the this great frontier area in medieval Spain that was the sort of buffer between the northern kingdoms, the Christian kingdoms, and the southern kingdoms, the Muslim kingdoms. And that in that zone, the Camino de Santiago developed. And when he uttered the words for the first time, Camino de Santiago, I just thought, oh my God, what is that? I need to know more. And I know all of you understand that moment when you first heard those 3 magical words. And for me, that was it. And when I went home after that semester, that was one of the highlights of that time, but it was the whole experience of being in abroad and studying in another culture and language, and especially Spain, that when I went home, I just thought I need to pick a study and pick a life that will let me do more of that. And so it was anthropology. For one thing, anthropology is very forgiving. It'll let you go to graduate school even though you have a BA in biology, and you can shift gears. And so I became a cultural anthropologist, and I studied for my doctorate in anthropology, and never turned back. I wanted to focus on Spain immediately, for my doctorate. And my advisors said, it would be really good if you actually study a non-Western culture for your first, field work. So I did the next best thing and went to Morocco and studied the stories, the oral histories that people were still passing on in their families of Jews and Muslims who had been expelled from Spain, not only in 1492, but in 1609. There were 2 waves of expulsions, major expulsions. And that was beautiful foundation for actually understanding the forces that had created the medieval world of Iberia and the Camino. And I also discovered in graduate school that as much as the training was to become a college professor, that also wasn't something that after I taught for 10 years that I wanted to pursue. I always wanted to be a writer. And so I started slowly finding ways to become a full-time writer. And I'm just getting there. Now I finally arrived there. It was a long process, but well worth it. And I took my training in anthropology. That really is the foundation of all my writing and the ability to do that kind of research. So I have no regrets.
How lucky we all are that that your career kind of took all those turns. And now, I just sit mesmerized sometimes hearing you speak, just your wealth of knowledge about all the cathedrals there and the different little villages and the food and everything. So we've all certainly benefited from your work and what you decided to do. So you said that was about in around mid 80s. So when was the first time that you actually then went on a Camino?
Yeah, that's such a hard question when I get it, because when you approach the Camino as an anthropologist and as a writer, I've gone to the Camino many times, but it may not be the way many people think of it. So the first time I set foot on the Camino as and intended to walk, and in those days it was, no reservations. You just start walking and then you try to find a place and you look for, the footpath. And that was 1995. And it was a small segment on the coast in Galicia. And then after that, I mean, I even realized back in Seville in 1986, I was actually living on a stopping point of the Via de la Plata. And I had gone hiking a lot that year, and I actually was on trails of the Via de la Plata, not even realizing it. But then after 1995, I started going back more and more. And again, that's where the answer of, well, but I was approaching it as an anthropologist and as a writer as much as a pilgrim. So oftentimes there would be a year where I would just go and live in one place and then explore all the routes around it, but then explore the historical and the cultural influences in that radius. So it was almost like I was walking more in spirals than I was in a line.
Okay.
And then I started walking longer routes, longer stretches of the Camino del Norte for several years. And then in 2007, in 1997, I also lived in Sahagún, and I lived in Santiago de Compostela. And then in 2007, I got a contract to write a book on the sacred sites and pilgrimage routes in Spain, the spiritual traveler's Spain. And that let me, I essentially was backpacking across Spain for 4.5 months. And the bulk of the routes that I was backpacking on were Camino routes. And then I got 5 weeks to do the whole Camino Frances. And that was just, despite all the prior runs on all the Caminos, and also maybe because I had already been walking for over 3 months, when I set foot on the Camino Frances and started walking from the Pyrenees and doing the whole trek west, it was a completely other experience. And it was like I had been primed, and it was magical. And then I just kept going back. So I don't know how to answer your question, how many times, but when I count all of those journeys, it's reaching 25.
Wow.
And it would have been, like many of you, last year would have been another.
Wow, Beebe. Wow. What a great thing you've been able to do. And no wonder that
Indeed.
you know so many different things about the different villages and everything. What made you pick that very first route out of all the routes that you could have done? What made you pick that first one in 95?
Absolutely no planning whatsoever. It was the year that I finished my doctorate, and I had just a little bit more work to do before I handed in the dissertation. So I was actually in Extremadura in southwestern Spain, and I had finished archival research. And I mean, thankfully, I actually had hiking boots on and a backpack, but I also had a little leatherette briefcase that had a 500-page manuscript in it that I was working on as I was in Spain. And my husband suggested that when I finish my research, he was going to fly into Lisbon, and I would continue the train west into Portugal, meet him, and we'd take the train north. And he knew I always wanted to go to Santiago de Compostela. And he said, let's at least just go there and visit the holy city. And then you can start planning, for the next time that you can come back and actually walk this whole route. So we were taking the train up, and we were taking that last connection that goes through Padrón and ends in Santiago de Compostela. And when we heard the train conductor say, last stop, Padrón, we just looked at each other and said, wait a minute, this is where it starts. Not, we've got to get off here. And the train was starting to pick up steam when we threw the door open and jumped out with our packs and, landed. And there was the clunky dissertation lid attached to the lid. And we spent the night in Padrón, and the next day was Sunday, the market day, and the church was open, and we went and visited the pillar, the stone pillar that apparently was a part of the temple to Neptune's temple that St. James's boat moored to when it arrived with his beheaded body. And we stayed with this lovely lady. She actually had a house on the train station, and just sort of, I think she knew, these people are primed for an adventure. And she just said, this is a really magical place. You might want to consider just, exploring here. And we actually wound up walking around that whole peninsula. So we went down and around the inlet and made our way up towards Noya before we finally got to Santiago de Compostela. And that was that was the first pilgrimage. But it all, it was such a great idea, because we passed an Iron Age castro, the Castro de Baronia. We passed a Neolithic dolmen, the Dolmen de Acheitos. And it's just, and then Noya, which means Noah, because the Galicians also have a legend that Noah anchored on that same, just across the inlet from, or the little finger of land from Padron, where St. James's boat arrived. Well, long before that, Noah also anchored, in this little part of Galicia. So it was just like, walking in mythology, in these mythic landscapes. And so I was hooked. Yeah.
That had to be so exciting for you, being an anthropologist and being able to go to all these historical spots.
It really was. Yeah. And people were so generous. That's really key, that first time, because we weren't, like, to really answer your question, I didn't plan to walk it. It just started happening. And then when we left Padron and we started walking, we were going for about 3 hours when we realized we have no map, we have no water, we have no food. We haven't seen anybody for the last 3 hours. We haven't even seen a cafe, which you guys know is really, really unusual in Spain. And then this woman drove by with her car, and we realized we were actually in a natural park. It was a reserve. And she drove by, and she stopped, and I asked her, where's the nearest village or a place where we can maybe find some food and buy some water and maybe even stay? And she just said, well, not for a while, but hang on. And she opened her trunk and pulled out a bottle of water and a couple sandwiches, and said that she was herself thinking of going for a hike later in the day and had bought these just in case, but she gave them to us. And I wanted to pay her for it. And she said, no, this is pilgrimage, and you two are pilgrims. And then she told us where a village was, about 10 kilometers. But in that moment, she said, no, this is pilgrimage, and identified us as pilgrims, which, I thought, we're pilgrims. I mean, look at what we no planning, no idea where we're going. But it didn't matter. It was to be identified that way. And there was such magic in that. And I thought, my God, our needs were met, even on this off the beaten, wacky track that we're on. St. James found us, helped us out. And it wound up being such an incredible time, because then we wandered into that village that she directed us to. And the first thing that happened was 4 women who were just, chain link together, walking across the road, arms interlinked, that's the word. They came and surrounded us in the circle of these 4 women of 4 different generations, from great granddaughter to great grandmother, and asked us where we were from and what we were doing, and then told us, well, if you go that way down that road, knock on so-and-so's door. They have an inn that normally opens later on in the spring, and they'll open it up and you can stay there. And we wound up going there, and there was no hot water, but there was still this wonderful room they opened up. They let us stay with them, and they shared their dinner with us. And the husband had just caught the fish from the ocean, and his wife had just dug up potatoes and plucked red peppers from their kitchen garden. So it was just a magical first pilgrimage.
Wow, it does sound magical. And just that first day, here you are out there, you hadn't really planned it, and all of a sudden the Camino's providing. Right?
Yes.
You get lunch, out of the blue, and what wonderful examples of the magic that I think many of us have experienced on the Camino. So that's wonderful. I know that Corey had a couple of questions coming up. We were going to ask what your high points were, but I think you might have just given a couple of the high points, but I want to eliminate that question. Would there be a point that you would think of it when you look back at all of your time in Spain, and your many different pilgrimages, that you would say was a high, like a real high of just a absolutely great day on the Camino, or just a tremendous experience?
Oh, wow. That's so hard. Oh, but I'll just go with what popped first in mind. It was 5 years ago, and I was on doing the Camino Frances again, and it was the first day. It was crossing the Pyrenees from Saint-Jean. It was actually from Orison. I had spent the night in Orison and was going into Roncesvalles, and all the weather predictions, this was mid-May, were that it was going to be a good day, a sunny day, maybe a little bit of light precipitation, but nothing that would, hinder a safe crossing. But then midday, all the weather changed, and this heavy rain moved in. And you guys know, if you've done that crossing, you really can be walking inside a cloud that comes down so low. And then an ice storm started. So the rain started turning to ice, and the Guardia Civil were coming up from the Roncesvalles side and telling people to get off the mountain. And they already had 2 people that had slipped, and somebody who had gone missing. So it was just and there, you couldn't see any of those amazing views. So it was just, walking through this ice storm and getting over the mountain as soon as safely as possible. And of course, when you hit that really, really steep entrance, the decline going into Roncesvalles, I just slid down the whole thing. And to the point where that evening I was picking out slivers of slate from my hems in my pants. It had just really jammed in. By the time I got to Roncesvalles, it was, I was just so frozen, and my fingers no longer worked. They were just, I couldn't even unzip my jacket to take it off and put on warmer clothes. And I had been dressed for a summer day. And then the temperatures dropped, and it had rained so hard that it was just, you had to keep moving. You couldn't stop and, re-attire. So I got to Roncesvalles, and then every place was full. It was completely fully booked, except, a wet floor in a part of the albergue. And it was just, everywhere was wet and cold and dank, and it was still gray. And I just thought, no, I'm going to keep walking. I went and visited Our Lady of Roncesvalles. To me, that's just, one of the highlights on the Camino and of Roncesvalles. And after that, I just kept walking to Borghete. And as I was going through that beautiful oak forest, the sun came out and things started drying out, and my fingers started moving again. And I got to Borghete, and there was no one there. And I just thought, I'm going to just ask in the first place I come to if they have a place, and stay there, even if I have to pay more, not albergue prices. And I went to the Hostal de Borghete, one of the first lodging inns that you meet in the village. And the guy had a room, and he, got me settled. And only later, when I went down to see, at that point I was working and walking. So I had a little tablet that I could learn how to compose articles on and send to editors. And I went down to see if he had any Wi-Fi that I could use to connect and send some work off. And he did. And as he was giving me the code, I looked over his shoulder, and there was a portrait of Hemingway. And I said, "Oh, Hemingway." And he said, "Oh yeah," very casually, "Yeah, this is where he used to go trout fishing when he came to stay in the Pyrenees." And then he started telling me, "Yeah, I was a little boy. He was a really nice guy, and we really liked him. Oh, and by the way, I've given you his room." And as a writer, I was just like, "Oh my God, I have Hemingway's room." So this was already enough for the day. But then when I checked my email, there were 2 messages from my agent, and she had 2 book deals for me for 2 books that we had been working really hard to pitch to publishers, and nothing was happening. And that one of the reasons I was walking the Camino is thinking, okay, if this doesn't happen, and I invested so much in that, what next? The way we walk for guidance in the next steps. And I just thought, it's highly unusual that after 3.5 years of waiting on even one book project to find a publisher. On the day I was crossing the ice storm, one email came 6 hours before the other, and both of them were while I was on the mountain. And I just thought, and then landing in Hemingway's hotel. So it was just this crazy magical day of, is that ever going to happen again? But I'm going to walk the Camino again. You better believe it, because it seems to do good stuff like that.
Goodness, Beebe, I'm so glad that I still asked that question. It like Hemingway became a muse for you, and there's another example of Camino.
Yeah, it really was a turning point in my work as a writer. It's not easy being a freelance writer, especially freelance travel writer, and so it really was a turning point.
Wow.
Yeah, that one day on the mountain.
Wow.
So
Thank you for sharing that. I seriously got chills from that. Wonderful. I know that Corey had a question, so I wanted to make sure we get her first question here.
yeah, so I wanted to ask you, I know a lot of people when they walk, they partway through kind of hit a wall or, have this feeling of not being able to continue on. And I know you've had so many journeys. Have you had any experience that sticks out or stands out for you as to where you've hit a wall or felt like you couldn't continue on, and how you've, really dug deep and found a way to continue to go on your journey?
That's such a vital question. Yeah, definitely. I would say every long Camino that I've done, there's been a wall somewhere. And it helps knowing it now, so it's like, okay, here comes the wall, just ride it through.
Right.
But when it happens the first or second time, you're just like, oh my God, am I going to really get to Santiago? How am I going to do this? And it's amazing how much, when you need it, the right people show up. And usually, within 5 to 10 minutes, the right person sits down next to me or walks past me on the trail or is in the same albergue, and just with whether they know it or not, they pick it up and they say something that cracks the wall open, and then a good night's sleep. Sometimes, it may be heresy to say this for some people, but sometimes I think it's okay to go and stay in a room of your own because to get that good night's sleep, and really get rested and have some space to really feel things through, or so that also helps. Like when I was researching the guidebook, the wall hit me in Cacabelos, and I was thinking, no, not here. I want to go drink wine. But I was so exhausted. I mean, I was just really, it was like, I was peeling myself off the floor to do anything. And part of it was because of the demands of the research, but part of it was also just, it's the wall comes. It comes at some point, and it hit me there. So I took an hour nap. And by the time I woke up, I was like ready to drink wine, and also realized, tomorrow night, got to get a private room. So, yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much. It always gives me hope knowing that that's going to come, and you usually can just find a way through it. And it's just a matter of resetting yourself. And so thank you for sharing.
You bet. Yeah. It's so important to listen to yourself too, don't you think? I mean, it's sometimes, that might be the time where you say, well, maybe I should just give myself permission to say, I don't know if I'm going to keep going, just to rest in it and feel it out, and maybe take a couple of days off, or go, visit Lugo, or, and come back. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you.
Space. Yeah. Well, I wanted to give everyone a chance. I'm sure some of you have some questions. I know that Mark had sent me a couple today. And Mark, if you want to unmute and ask them, you can, or I can read them off to Beebe, whatever you want to do.
Well, yeah, here's my question. I'm doing kind of a virtual Camino right now, sort of logging my miles and following along where I'd be on the route. And I'm using your guide, which is helping quite a lot. I really enjoy it. And I appreciate that you talk a lot about the culture along the way, and the food, and the wine and whatnot. Last time I was doing a portion of the Camino, At the same time, I was trying to grow grapes at home and make wine, which wasn't very successful. But as I was walking by all these vineyards, I was kind of checking them out and very curious. And then I would get to a bar, and I was always I thought it would really be neat if you could make a point of ordering, drinking whatever local wine along the way, just sort of the common, something that a local would order as their everyday wine, nothing fancy or whatnot. And my Spanish is not too bad, but I was always a little intimidated. I wasn't sure exactly how to phrase that question. So maybe you can help me with that. And also, I thought a few times I saw people, locals, order a glass of beer, and it seemed like they added some like lemonade or lemon juice or something, which seems like a great thing for a thirsty pilgrim. So I wondered if you knew about that as well.
Oh, great questions, Mark. Yeah, with the beer with the lemon, I used to know what that was called, and I will find out and send Lee and Corey the answer so they can relay that back to you. It's some special name, and it is absolutely wonderful and refreshing. And the wine, the chances that you're drinking the local wine are pretty high in any bar that you go into. That's just the Spanish way. They haven't lost that tradition of going down the road and filling up or buying a barrel and hauling it back to the bar, and that's the house wine. But to be sure, you can say, vino de la región, is or vino de la casa, and you can also say es el vino de aquí, to really specify that. But the chances are you've already been drinking the most local, but probably the most inexpensive too, which isn't bad, and of course, if you wanted to, you could make a wine Camino, and work in some time to hit some of the bodegas that are right on the trail or just a little ways off. A Camino de Vino.
Yeah, we actually
a whole new route there, Beebe. The wine Camino, Vino Camino.
I think
we actually have
a
restaurant. We own a restaurant, and when I came back, I found out that one of our wines is from Monjardin, right along the route there. I walked right by it practically, but we charge a little bit more than €1 for a glass at our restaurant.
I know, isn't that wonderful? Crazy. Monjardin, the little cafe just up the platform to the albergue. I think they serve the white wine that's made right down the slope. So it's pretty cool.
Nice.
While we're on, thank you, Mark. While we're on wine, I know Corey had a question. So maybe this will be a good time to talk, Corey.
I wondered if you have a favorite wine tour or a winery that, I know they're probably all amazing, but is there one that stands out most to you? Yeah,
you're absolutely right. They're all amazing because the wine is so good all across northern Spain. But for one thing, in Logroño, when you're in Logroño, that's a lot of people don't think that could be a great place for a rest day, maybe because it's so early and in a lot of people walking the Frances. But it is actually a great place to spend an extra day and sign up for a wine tour within the city. They have some walking tours. One of them is a wine tour and another is a bar tour. And Logroño has all these underground caverns that are actually where they store the wine. It's under the city. So that's access to that. But there's also, the tourist office used to organize them, but they haven't in recent years. Yet there's a private operation run by Rebecca Perez called Rioja Like a Native. And she's in Logroño, and she'll organize wine tours. She'll tailor them to your interests and take you to a lot of the wineries around Rioja, as well as with more history and culture and like some of the monasteries. That's a really cool thing to do. But I do have some favorites, just like you're walking on the Camino and you just want to try the really good tipple. It's just right on the side of the road. And I have two favorites. One is when you've left Navarrete, and you're just past Ventosa and you're on your way to Nájera, there's a vineyard that is called Bodegas Alvia. And they have a pilgrim cut out right out, it's like a plywood pilgrim, basically, with a sign saying, "Pilgrims welcome, come for a tasting." And it's like, come for a tasting. It is so worth it. And they create wines from 5 different kinds of grapes, and their land is what we've been walking through. The vineyards are the ones that you're walking through to get to Nájera. They have Tempranillo, they have Garnacha, they have Graciano, and then they also, those are the red wines. They have Viura, and they have I think it's Malvasia, which is another white grape. And the other favorite is in the Cacabelos area. There's a cooperative right before you get to Cacabelos that is a wine cooperative that they have wine tastings when they're open. And then right after Cacabelos, there's a place called Bodegas, Bodegas Godelia. It's between Cacabelos and Piedros on the way to Villafranca del Bierzo. And that is a beautiful place to taste 2 grape varietals that are, and they're single varietal wines that are special to the El Bierzo area. The Mencía for red wine and the Godello for white, which is kind of like a meaty Albarino.
So
That's
good.
That should be,
possible.
maybe that should be your next book, Beebe, because I'm seeing everybody rapidly taking notes.
Oh yeah, I'm
You
literally
were my
writing
people.
as fast as I can.
I should have poured a glass of wine for this.
Right,
I know. See,
you will be Vino Camino by Beebe. All right, so
thank you so much.
I know
Oh,
that
thank
Robert had a question, Robert Deming. So Robert, do you want to unmute yourself and ask Beebe your question?
Yes. So anthropology is a science, and a lot of the Camino is myth and legend and stories. How do you relate those two?
Oh, well, because I think anthropology is both a science and a humanities. It's, especially in the American tradition. And I went to the University of Pennsylvania has really stayed with the foundation of the American tradition of anthropology, which was to keep the 4 fields of the discipline together in one, under one umbrella. There's physical anthropology, there's archaeology, there's linguistics, and there's cultural anthropology. And the logic behind it is that to study, since anthropology is really the study of humanity, of being human, you need to study humans from all their angles, the biological, the historical, the cultural, the linguistic. And so that's how I merge them. And I think the Camino is such a great place to try out all those different layers in anthropology, the way it looks at being human, because you have the archaeology, you have the physical, natural environment, you have rich culture, and you have several linguistic areas. So it's a great playground for anthropologists and other pilgrims. I hope that answers your question.
Robert, did you have a follow-up to that?
Yes, talk about Padron and the stone. It's under an altar in a church. The stone
Yes.
the stone boat with St. James' body was to have tied up to. Did you come to any conclusions about that?
I think it's authentic. I really think it was a pillar from the Roman era, and it probably was a part of a Roman structure that was there. It's possible it was also really there at that location of the church, because Padron, the river has silted up over the last 2,000 years, and so Padron could have been. And I think it was Iria Flavia during the Roman period. It was actually on the bank of the river, And so it was feasible. And there's a strong likelihood that indeed there was a Roman temple there, and it probably was devoted to Neptune. It's also, it's a story that speaks about a truth in a lot of historical dynamics, and that when one people is taking over another people, they tend to take over their sacred sites. And so here you have the Temple of Neptune, and the perfect place for a new coming faith to anchor would be at that temple, not just because it wants to dominate it. After all, St. James is, a peace-loving person or personality, but to synchronize with the fact that people already identify that spot as sacred. And so it translates more easily to introduce a new sacred system on the older one.
Another question about padron. Have you ever had a hot padron pepper?
I'm so glad you asked.
I never did.
Oh, you haven't? It's so funny. It is Russian roulette, for sure. And I usually get at least one. But some people say that, some bushes actually are all sweet. And some bushes can also revert to all hot. So gotta keep eating them, Robert. You'll get your padron.
I guess I didn't have enough of them, but I live in Texas, so hot peppers are a way of life here.
Oh, yeah.
I've actually spoken to you via email or text or something about speaking on our American Pilgrims page with Austin. We're coming up in the next month or two.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, we'll be sure to get a link for everyone if they want to get to visit with Beebe again at Robert's meeting. So we'll make sure to do that. Anyone else have a question for Beebe? Corey and I have a list of probably 20 more questions, but we obviously want to give everyone else a chance. So please, if you have a question you'd like to direct towards Beebe, please give me a little wave, unmute yourself and ask it. Anyone? I know you're wanting to ask. And believe me, somebody will love your question. All right, well, if not, I will move on to another question. If you change your mind, put something in the notes if I don't see you, and we'll get your question. So one of the things I was thinking about today is that if you were to rewrite the Moon Guide, your latest book, would there be something now that you would add to it that when you look back, you're like, oh gosh, I would really want to add this?
Yeah, that I really want to add. Yeah. Well, I actually am starting to put my mind to the fact that we are going to go into a second edition. So I've been looking at that, and right now I have a list, and I'm drawing a blank, maybe because I've been working too hard at it. And also that the reality is I probably am going to have to write something about walking the Camino post-COVID, or as COVID starts, we start learning how to live with it safely, with more immunization. So I think people are really, they'd like to know more about the wildlife. And I think I would love to just have a dedicated, if anything, page or two just about the wildlife. Or there's all these really cool, and you guys can tell me if I'm just going way too deep in a nerd direction, but there's all these monumental historical trees. They're sacred trees on the Camino. Like there's the cypress in Samos on the monastery grounds, and there's the chestnut just before Tria Castella, that chestnut tree in Ramil. And there's several others, and there's just this whole, the sacred trees, I think would be really fun. Wow. But I'd love to actually hear from you guys. Like, is there something that you really, really want to be on your journey that you'd like to see in a book?
Oh, great question. Anyone have anything they want to offer to Beebe? William. William, just unmute.
I think you need to unmute.
Sure, I unmuted.
Okay.
We've had fun looking for dolmen throughout Spain. And there really are a lot. There's a lot of really
Yeah.
beautiful ones. Some are, less cleaned up, and others are pretty fancy, actually. And I wondered, I've never paid attention to access from the Camino.
Yeah.
We've we've generally had a car. But it's one of those things when you show people that have been in Spain, what there is out there, they go, wow, where was that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like the area around Logroño has something like 80 plus dolmens, but you need a car. I mean, the closest dolmen is a bus ride to LaGuardia, and then it's in the middle of a vineyard. So, where's Mark? Mark, put it on your list.
And it's a good one too in LaGuardia.
Yeah.
LaGuardia.
Yeah. And then there's, of course, tons in Galicia. But and I actually I had proposed to the publisher, I said, let's have, some detours to get to the dolmens. But it winds up being detours that could take you 20 kilometers, and it started feeling a little too far off the path. But I'm so glad you mentioned the dolmens.
Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, we like going nowhere in particular.
I mean, isn't that a part of the magic of Spain, is that there is all these ancient layers? I mean, you've got Atapuerca. You can't get more ancient than that at 1.2 million years of human remains. And then it just moves forward in time, through, the rest of the Paleolithic, and then into, the Neolithic, and then into the Iron Ages and the Bronze Age, and just keeps going. And then you get Romans. And
yeah, my very favorite was one description that was made by, oh God, they had a name for what the woman is, but she carried this large stone on top of her head while nursing and spinning. Men have a hard time doing any of those.
I think I would have a hard time too.
Right.
All right, William.
Thank you.
We did have, I think, just one comment, and I think maybe this was for your next, if you did a revision. Someone mentioned if there are any special places, I think this might have been Pina, any special places besides Santiago, maybe just special sites in Santiago, maybe is the point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole chapter in the book right now on Santiago. And one of the cool things that I didn't even know until I was researching the book, that somebody pointed out, there's a petroglyph in Santiago de Compostela. And it's actually right on the city limits, but it's still there, and it's about 3,000 years old, and it appears to be from the late Bronze Age, and it's of a warrior with wings and daggers all around him, and it's just there. So it's in my guidebook, and I, for the person who wants to follow my trail notes, they can walk through the city and find this in a forest just tucked on the edge of it's there in the city. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, Santiago really has so much to offer, and it's too bad that for so many folks, once they arrive in Santiago, you got to hurry back home, but there's so much to discover there, and it's just a lovely city in itself, and highly recommend if you get time to spend more time there. I know Corey had one last follow-up question we have for Beebe, and then we will move on to Father Stephen, because I want to make sure that we get some of that information in tonight. So, Corey, did you want to ask your last question?
Yeah, really quickly, I did want to say that I love in your book the spiritual and mystical elements that you brought in, and any more of that you can weave in, I mean, obviously do what you need to do, but that's something that really connects to me, and I really loved that you weaved that in the other book as well. So thank you.
That's so wonderful to hear. Thank you. Yeah, I'll be sure to do that.
I love it. Thank you. And quickly, I just wanted to ask you, I had never heard about the halfway certificate until I read your book. Do you have a brief explanation about that? I know we need to let Father Stephen speak, but that was something that was really exciting to me that I had never heard about.
You bet. Yeah, you know, you get it in Sahagún, which is kind of considered the midway point on the Camino Frances if you've started in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port or Roncesvalles. And for those of you who've walked the Camino Frances and walked that stretch, as you're approaching Sahagún, you probably have seen the two stone kind of guardians, like a gate that you walk through right after you walk past the little chapel by the river outside of Sahagún, and that's actually marking the midway point. It's like walking through the gates of Gondor, you know, if you love the Lord of the Rings. It's just really mythic. And then you walk into Sahagún and you go to the Peregrina monastery that's up on the hill just off on the edge of Sahagún, and that's where they give the certificate. And it's just something that I think the mayor and the city town hall decided to implement. This is what it looks like. And it tells you that you've made the halfway mark. And the La Peregrina is also a beautiful building to explore. It has a lot of Islamic elements from the Mudehar workers who built it. And then it became a convent and they plastered over it. And only around 97, when I was living there, they peeled back the plaster and found tile work and engraving work that's like walking into the Alhambra. So it's really worth going to. And that's where you get your halfway certificate.
So cool. Thank you so much.
It helps people get past the wall too. It's like, you're halfway done, keep going.
Right. So
anyone
good.
Tonight on the call that has that halfway certificate? Yeah, Kurt and Susan. Excellent. Cool. Excellent. All right. Well, Beebe, I think we could listen to you all night, and we are just so grateful for you coming on tonight and sharing just a sliver of your expertise.
Thank you. It's been such a treat to be with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome back anytime. We would love to have you again, and we'll be sure to get the information when you are at that Austin meeting. We'll make sure that everybody here in this group knows when that will be. So in case they want to hear some more from you, they get that chance. So just a reminder, everyone, this is Beebe's latest book, and I will put in the chat in just a few moments the link to Amazon, which will show all of her books, and you can check all of those out. And also she has a great episode with am I saying Mark Mullins, right?
Oh, Dan Mullins in Australia. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent episode. So you may want to check that out. So anyway, so thank you so much, Beebe. And we want to now move to Father Stephen Rindahl. And Father's here tonight because we just interviewed him. I guess now it's been 2 weeks ago, right? And we had such a great response. So many people asking questions about his 501(c)(3) and I just wanted to give him a chance to kind of talk about the program and for everybody to get a chance to meet him. Corey and I loved interviewing him and we had such a great time. And so we just said, hey, you know, we have a few minutes at the end of this happy hour. Do you want to jump on? And he was good enough to say, sure, I'll do that. So anyway, everyone say hi to Father Stephen. And Father Stephen, if you just want to say a few words about your program and how you started it and kind of what's going on with it right now.
Okay, yeah, thank you and appreciate being on. Before I get started though, when people first started putting their, like, I'm from wherever, there was a couple that said, I'm from Montana, so I need to know where you're from in Montana.
They're doing it.
There's the whole mute, unmute thing, yeah.
We're from Billings.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. My cousin's a nurse in Billings. My family is from Billings and east. So Fairview, Brockton, Miles City, that whole area is filled with my family.
Oh, wow.
So and I saw that, I like, and then back in the late 80s, early 90s, I went to the smoke jumper school out in Missoula.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So okay, so I just wanted to make that connection.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, I just had to say, Stephen, remember I told you about the couple that I wanted you to share your Martin Sheen story with?
Oh yeah, who's?
That's Kurt and Susan. So
Oh
maybe you can
yeah,
stay on, maybe you guys can all stay on at the end and you can share that
Sure.
story and anybody else that wants to hear it or whatever. But anyway, Warriors on the way.
yeah. Martin and I have become kind of irregular pen pals. Um, so yeah, Warriors on the Way. Warriors on the Way is a as was just mentioned, a 501c3. It's a purpose designed pilgrimage for combat veterans who are seeking healing from PTSD and moral injury, which lots of people have heard about PTSD. It's been kind of the forefront of terminology for a long time. Moral injury is a lesser known, similar but not the same condition. And so what we do is we work with combat veterans who are dealing with either PTSD, moral injury, or what is actually quite frequent among combat veterans, a combination of both. And it's myself and Dr. Lisa Landry, Dr. Renee Phillips, who are both psychologists, so they cover the behavioral health side, and myself as a priest covering the spirituality side, bringing healing to people who are suffering PTSD, moral injury, or both, using the Camino de Santiago as the therapeutic tool. And it's created incredible success. We have consistently shown a group average, and we do everything in group. We do all of our numbers in groups because we guarantee the anonymity of the participants. But we have a group, we've shown a consistent group average of a 70% reduction in symptoms from the start of the pilgrimage to the end. And anecdotally, just because my phone continues to erupt with text activity, those who participate continue talking to each other and supporting each other for the years thereafter. And so it's a brilliant program that we have designed it to fit within 2 weeks, because that's kind of the typical time away from work a person can get. And so we start just outside of Astorga and then go on through Santiago de Compostela. And each day we begin with a healing message from the Gospels. And then we start walking so that people can sort of meditate on that healing message that they heard in the morning. Myself and the psychologist mixed with those who are on the pilgrimage throughout the day as we're walking. As anyone who's been knows, you get lots of time to think and talk as we work together. And the results, like I said, have been amazing, truly amazing. And it was all born out of my own Camino. I'd been in the Army for 31 years. My last assignment was at the Army Medical Center and School in San Antonio, which I now claim as home because it's nice and warm and no longer have to face the winters of Montana. As much as I love the state, I don't love winter, so it's wonderful being in the South. And I had done my doctorate in how to respond to combat trauma. And so I took that information along with the curriculum that I developed for the Army Chaplain Corps on how to provide a ministerial response to moral injury. And, that was my background. And I walked the Camino as my personal, I'm about to retire from the Army after a really long time, and I ought to be intentional in the transition. And when I was on that Camino, I realized this will be really helpful to other veterans. So I got home, sat down, took all of the background knowledge that I had in the research I had on combat trauma, the research that I did for the sake of developing that curriculum on moral injury, combined it with my own personal experience on the Camino, and developed the Warriors on the Way design. I presented that to a few colleagues who agreed that it would be a good idea, went through the process of becoming a 501c3 and started putting out some publicity to gain some attention, both for the sake of gaining combat veteran pilgrims and for the sake of gaining some donors so that we can execute our first iteration. And brought our first group out and just had a brilliant time. Learned a lot, made a few mistakes, had a very forgiving group of people with along on the trip. And so every time we go out, we continue to refine and improve the program. So it's been just a great experience for myself, just speaking at the personal level, but those who are involved, those who get accepted into the program, go on the trip, just years and years go by and still getting just this great positive feedback from the individuals who have gone. I get feedback from family members who see the change in their spouse, see this change in their parent. So yeah, it's brilliant. So that's like a real fast thumbnail version, and I'm open to any questions.
I was just going to ask. So are there any questions tonight? Yes, Catherine?
So what are the donations used for? How does that work?
Okay, yeah, thank you. Everybody makes a gift of their time and talent. And so for myself, that really is not necessarily a real significant thing because I have taken my life and adjusted it to my retirement income from the Army. So going on the trip for me, going on the trip is a bonus. For the two clinical psychologists that are on our team, they take time away from their private practice. And so it's a huge financial burden for them to just shut down their practice for a few weeks and go. The point of saying that is that everything that comes into the 501c3, into Warriors on the Way, in the way of a donation, goes directly to the expenses of the pilgrimage. We cover the pilgrims' airfare from everyone has to start in San Antonio. That's the only thing. That's the only demand that we make of the individual pilgrim. You have to get yourself to San Antonio. We all travel together. So we cover the airfare from San Antonio to Madrid, ground transportation to our start point right outside of Astorga, all meals, all lodging, the backpacks, the trekking poles, the sleeping bags, the canteen, everything is supplied. You show up in the clothes you want to walk in, and you have to pay for your own snacks because we do pay for the meals. But if you want to supplement your meals with Cokes and candy bars, we don't pay for that.
I know, Father Stephen, I was just going to say that you had mentioned when we were talking before that you can give as much as you want, but also don't be afraid to, if you just have a little bit to give, because you could sponsor something like a lunch for one of the warriors. So,
right.
So maybe if you just want to mention that a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Of course, there's certain fluctuations based on the cost of airfare and the rate of exchange, but we have a working budget of $37.50 per pilgrim to cover the expenses that were mentioned just a moment ago. And we've had people who call up and say, how much does it cost to sponsor a pilgrim? It costs $37.50. And within a few days, we receive a check for $37.50. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we've got people who's like, I want to cover a breakfast. I want to cover a coffee break. And so you get, you can get a coffee and a little sweet side for a couple euro. So we've got people who will sponsor a 20 euro, a 25 euro coffee break, and then everything in between. So that's kind of the spectrum of how the money works. I'm glad to answer any additional questions, but
Uh,
on that matter, anybody's got a concern.
I think William had a question for us.
Thank you. I have PTSD. I'm a 100% combat related disabled vet. I'm assuming that you're staying in private lodging. My biggest manifestation is alerting. And I got better after, but I stayed in albergues every time I've walked. I've done 6 Caminos. So are you staying in private or public albergues?
It's a mixture. It's a mixture. Typically with a group, with our group size, we will dominate wherever we are.
How big is your group? I'm sorry.
What's that?
How big are your groups?
We go with a group of 12.
Oh, yeah.
And so, especially with the smaller ones, we either have every bed or we have all but a couple beds. And so the effect of that is it's multifold, really. It really restores that sense of camaraderie that is built in the service. And then also the knowledge that there are other people here like me, and I know that I'm safe. So even in places that we don't actually take over the entire albergue, there is still a sense of safety in the numbers. And we had a person on our first albergue that had not slept through the night in over 10, a person who was on our first pilgrimage in the first, well, now I've got myself all tongue tied. Hold on a second. We had a person who on our first pilgrimage, who personally had not slept through the night in over 10 years, within 3 nights of being on the pilgrimage, was sleeping through the night and sleeping soundly.
Wow.
And so yeah, one of the ways to reduce PTSD symptoms is to be closely connected with those who have same or similar experiences. And so we bring everybody together with that common background. And with the common background, the camaraderie is built extremely quickly. And that fosters that sense of safety while on the pilgrimage. So we do use private albergues, we do use public and municipals, but wherever we go, we are the largest body of people in that particular albergue, which overcomes some of what would typically be a sense of insecurity or an opportunity for triggers to really kind of run rampant because of the security in numbers.
I'm going to jump in here just for a quick second. It's about 1:15, and I know some of you may have more questions for Father Stephen. If he can stick around, if you want to stay around after we say goodbye, please do so, and maybe he can answer just a couple of more questions. But I just wanted to do a quick thank you to Beebe and to Father Stephen for being here tonight, and also to all of you for being a part of this Camino family. We are just so grateful to have everyone here tonight and to see your faces. We have people here that have been guests at our happy hour: Simon and Susan and Kurt and Robert and Michelle. And maybe one of you might want to come on next time if you want to talk about your pilgrimage. So let us know if you would ever like to be a guest at our happy hour. And I did put some notes in the chat as far as the links. So make sure you check that out before you leave if you want to copy that. Our next meeting is this coming Tuesday. It's the Spanish Conversation Hour at 11 a.m. Mountain. And then, of course, we have our book club, and then we have next month's happy hour, which will be the pilgrimages in Japan. So we hope to see everyone back here. If you listed your email, we will add you to our email list so that we will have your email for the just upcoming events. Of course, we always have that on Facebook, but if you guys are like me, it's getting kind of tough to find all of these things on Facebook anymore. There's just so much. So trying to narrow that down and have it in one spot. If you've really enjoyed hearing Father Stephen talk about his organization tonight, there are 2 videos on our YouTube channel featuring Father Stephen, and I highly encourage you to especially watch his own personal pilgrimage stories. Have a box of Kleenex with you because Corey and I both cried during the interviews. They're fantastic. And while you're there, check out Simon and Robert and Michelle and Susan and Kurt's videos. So anyways, the YouTube channel is the Camino Cafe. And so thank you all. Let's all say goodbye to each other. If you want to stay on for a few more minutes, I'll leave this call on so we can all chat for a few more minutes. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. So buen camino, everyone.
Buen camino.
Bye.